Welcome to the Podium Pod, the Pick and Rolls National Basketball Podcast, as we continue, and we're almost here. Paris 2024. We're only a few short days out. I'm Adam Webster, and I'm joined today by Pick and Roll feature writer, my very good friend Tom Hirsch, for the very first time this season on the Podium Pod. Tom, welcome to the show. Great to have you here. Great to have you talking Opals basketball.
Great to be with you again. I've not been on the Podium Pod since, I think, Okinawa last year during the FIBA Men's World Cup. So really looking forward to getting stuck into the action of both teams over the next couple of weeks. A lot to talk about, but the Opals is an intriguing story, as we'll dive into shortly, as to just where they're at right now heading into that opening game on Monday.
Yeah, we had a game overnight, the very last warm-up game for the Opals prior to them starting their group phase of Paris 2024. They played Canada, who ironically is in their group. We haven't seen, say, the Boomers play a team that's in their group in the warm-up games, but we saw the Opals, not just any game, but their final warm-up game was against one of their group rivals. They lost the game 77-74 in Segovia in what was, scrappy and physical. I want to talk to you about a few things that stood out to me, but what stood out to you in this contest?
First and foremost, it was who was not playing for the Opals in this one. So still no Steph Talbot, still no Izzy Borlase. Beck Allen and Tess Madgen were back for this one, and then they rested Lauren Jackson as well. So there's a couple of things you can take away for that. The resting Lauren Jackson piece, fine. I'm sure they're going to manage her as much as they can through the early rounds of this tournament. And, if some of the games are easier, not that they necessarily will be, then they'll limit her minutes and so forth. Steph Talbot not playing as yet is a concern to me, because there's expectations that she's going to be a big part of the success of this team. Obviously, what she did at the 2022 World Cup, we all know about, all tournament first team. And yes, she's coming off a year away from the game with the ACL injury. She's only been back for 4 or 5 months, a handful of games in the WNBL before she went over. And she was really starting to find her way with the LA Sparks, moving to the starting lineup, playing some really solid basketball before this most recent little foot injury scare. Now, all indications are she's just being managed into this tournament. And I've not heard of any word or concern that she won't be available for these games. But the fact that she's had no game time with these teammates is a little worrying to me. And for the rest of them who haven't necessarily played together over the last week, a lot of them played together in those qualifying games back in February in Brazil. They've got cohesion, they've got chemistry. But there are a few players on this team that Steph Talbot has not set foot on a court with since that World Cup, a number of them. So how much of a role she'll play in the early going is up for questions, up for debate right now. And maybe that's the plan, just to get her ramped up more and more and more. And obviously, if they can advance through to the knockout phase, that's maybe when she'll start to hit her strides. But I wouldn't expect necessarily Steph Talbot to just walk into that starting lineup when they take the floor against Nigeria for that opening game next week, because she's underdone right now. And I'm just not sure that she can come in and play that kind of big role right away.
Do you see her potentially playing some spot minutes just to kind of get her out there and get her comfortable maybe later in the game if there's a wide margin there in the Opals' favour?
I think the plan would be to get her on the floor at some point as soon as possible. So assuming she's healthy, they'll get her into that game against Nigeria. It's just what kind of role does she play? And again, how many minutes, because they will need to ease her in, because that first game against Nigeria, let's be honest, that's the easiest of their 3 pool games, right? So it's a good chance to get her acclimated to the systems, the schemes, and even just get her legs back underneath her, get a bit of those cobwebs out, if you will. But once they hit that second game against Canada, we know how tough that's going to be based on what we just saw overnight. It's not going to be an easy one by any means. And France is potentially going to be even harder. So you want to have whatever Steph Talbot's going to give you, you want her to try and find that as quickly as possible, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
A couple of other injury concerns for the Opals that we've got to talk about. Beck Allen being the first one, dealing with a back complaint, heading into these warm-up games, and a bit of a concern about her overall health. Tom, are you worried about Beck Allen's health for this tournament at all?
Well, I wasn't, from watching the way she was moving early in this game. I mean, her opening move off the bench was a really strong attack to the basket in true Beck Allen fashion. She dumped it off to a teammate for an easy layup. She made some nice other drives. She moved and relocated for an open three and knocked that down. But then she did get injured in some sort of way, in a defensive transition play, trying to get back and stop someone. And she tweaked something and instantly put her hand up and went straight off the court into the locker room. And we didn't see her again for the rest of the game. So she played less than 6 minutes. You could see her in the second half standing up on the bench with a wrap around, I think it was her right hamstring area. So whether there's some sort of little niggle or tweak there, we'll need to keep an eye on. We've not been able to find that any information, unfortunately. During the course of the day, the Opals have been traveling from Spain over to France. But, you know, the good news is it's Wednesday and their first game isn't until Monday night our time. So there's enough time, if it's just a small little niggle, to manage that and get her okay. But it is, again, another player who's a bit underdone coming in, missed her last couple games with Phoenix before joining the Opals, didn't play in the opening game, and then only played the 5 or 6 minutes in this one. Again, might need to be eased in, but she's someone who's expected to walk into the starting lineup. Well, that was the plan anyway, once she was ramped up and healthy. So whether that'll be the plan against Nigeria, and maybe it's a case that we'll see a different starting lineup for the first game against Nigeria from what we'll see in the second game against Canada, and Sandy will manage the load of people like Beck Allen, Madgen, Talbot, obviously, leading into that between those first and second games. But you do want a fit and firing and healthy Beck Allen, because she's so key to what this team does on both ends of the floor, as is Steph Talbot for that matter.
The last one I want to talk about is Izzy Borlase. We spoke about Izzy last night on the show with Hayley Wilds, and the conversation was very much around, is this going to be an experience for Izzy and an experience to get her ready for Los Angeles, Brisbane, future Olympics, given that she's, you know, about to turn, I believe, 20 years old. So a lot of Olympics in Izzy's future. She's also been dealing with, I believe, an ankle complaint or a foot complaint, something in that region, and hasn't played these warm-up games. So for Izzy, do you see her having a cameo role, see her having a role in the group stage? Or alternatively, is this a case of she is healthy, which we believe her to be healthy by the pool or group round because she's being taken to Paris in the first place? But if that's the case, it'll be an in case of emergency sort of situation or an end of game type situation for Izzy.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's going to come down to where Sandy Brondello and the coaching staff see her in terms of the pecking order and the rotations. And I know you and Hayley last night spoke about that she might be in those kind of 10, 11, 12 range of spots on this roster, and that's fine. She is someone who could come in and be a bit of an X factor in a particular moment, in a particular game, just because of her ability. She can score in a hurry. She's solid and active defensively. She's strong on the boards. She can move the ball, so she can have an impact. It's just how much of a role they've kind of lined up for her to play. But I do think it's more about getting some experience under her belt at this level for future tournaments as much as anything, but not to say she won't have some opportunities to potentially help them along in a particular scenario here or there. And I think that, again, that first game against Nigeria would be a good opportunity to get some minutes into her. What happens from there as those games start getting tougher and tougher, her role and her minutes will most likely be reduced, I would expect.
Well, at this time, it's my role to tell you the Podium Pod is brought to you by Team Feet. Team Feet offers premium athletic socks for modern teams, however they compete, with sweat wicking cotton, arch support, ventilation panels, and compression stitching. Team Feet socks are built to outperform. Whether your team is tiny or 1,000 strong, Team Feet unites and excites your players and supporters with their combination of quality and performance. Join basketball teams around Australia and the world by choosing Team Feet. For designs and worldwide delivery, head to teamfeet.com. Talking about this game in particular, Tom, Canada made it really, really difficult for the Opals. They were making everything really challenging for them, particularly across the whole game. But I noticed in particular in the first half, there were no easy entry passes. You know, they were doubling on inbounds. They were making everything exceedingly difficult. And the offense seemed to stagnate in different parts. This is a team the Opals will see. So is this a case of Sandy Brondello maybe not showing her full poker hand in this contest, and instead seeing how Canada choose to play Australia and making the adjustments at the time that the group stage rolls around?
I would think there's a little bit of that plays into it, and obviously resting someone like Lauren Jackson plays into that a little bit as well. So it's not necessarily the full rotation that you'd expect from the Opals when they do face Canada in that second game next week. But it was a really good test and a good showing for the Opals to see how they can execute, in what sort of spots they can execute, how Canada might defend certain sets or schemes as well as how they need to defend Canada's schemes. And Canada was at full strength, and I think they were likely showing most of what they're going to be doing, playing through some of their bigger names. I thought the Opals did you spoke about the Canada making life difficult for the Opals, but I thought the reverse was also true in the Opals, making life really difficult for the likes of Kia Nurse and Bridget Carlton, two of their bigger name scorers and more experienced WNBA players. And it was Kayla Alexander, who most people probably wouldn't have expected to be such a big focal point for them offensively, was the one that was kind of let score here and there. It was like, let anyone else beat us besides her. Don't let Aaliyah Edwards get off. Don't let Carlton get clean looks at the basket and so forth. So that was interesting as well. But you're right. I mean, the execution of the Opals offensively was tested at times, and they had to work for a number of baskets. At times they looked great. They moved the ball beautifully. They got wide open threes. They got nice drives to the basket or dump offs to their bigs. But at other times it was really scrappy, and they really had to work just to create some separation and even get a good look. And you saw a few shot clock violations, which you never really want to see from a team. So it was a good test, and I think they'll learn a lot from this game. The other thing that was telling to me was the point guard play. And there's still a bit of a question mark as to who's going to lead that charge for Sandy Brondello. We've seen Jade Melbourne play a real strong feature role as the lead point guard in these two warm-up games, and that happened again today. Even though she started alongside Tess Madgen and Sammy Wickham, it was Melbourne who was the primary ball handler, the primary offensive initiator. And even when she went off the floor, it was Christy Wallace who came on and took over those point guard duties. So it wasn't Wickham or Madgen really taking the reins. Madgen did it a little bit at times, but it was primarily Melbourne and Wallace. So it's going to be really telling to me if that's who she sticks with when they start the real games against Nigeria. I mean, Jade's been sensational. And, you kind of look at her in some ways in akin to what Josh Giddey's doing on the Boomers, as someone who is clearly one of the future focal points. I mean, Giddey obviously is that now for the Boomers, but Jade is a future focal point for this program moving forward. And she's only going to get better and better from having more reps at this level. And the fact that Sandy's been willing to hand her the keys in these warm-up games is really promising in terms of the role she'll play. Now, whether she continues to start or not through this tournament, whether she continues to play big minutes as she has, some of that might be dictated by how much Steph Talbot can go and her kind of playmaking ability, how healthy Tess Madgen really feels as well. But I do like what Jade's given them in terms of really being able to push the pace in transition, really test the opposing defenses, and then just cut and move and relocate and get herself open for threes and attack the basket. And I thought she did that really well in both of these two warm-up games.
She was brilliant, and as you say, sort of led the offense in a lot of aspects for both of these games, which I guess was probably a surprise to me due to the amount of veterans that are surrounding Jade on this roster, but a huge vote of confidence for her heading into Paris. We won't get to talk to you again until one of the group games, Tom, so I want a bit of a prediction from you here. Who are the starting five on the floor for the first game against Nigeria, firstly? And secondly, how far can this team go, in your opinion?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, based on what I've seen through the warm-up games, but also the way that the pieces might fit together, my mind is around if Jade Melbourne starts, and I would love to see her start, she'd be at the 1 with Sammy Wickham at the 2, because that gives just another ball handler and some great shooting just to help to spread the floor. I think you have to have Beck Allen as your starting 3 if she's healthy and good to go, just because of her ability to score, but also she is one of the best perimeter defenders in the world right now. And you need that ability with this group. And then it has to be Ezzy Magbagor and Alana Smith up front. And we've seen those two work so well together on both ends of the floor, but especially the impact they're having defensively. And you saw that in this game against Canada as well. The rim protection is next level. There's nothing easy for the opposing bigs. And you saw the only way their bigs were really able to score was from popping out to the perimeter or to the short corner. And Kayla Alexander kind of made a living out of that in this particular game from that short corner, little baseline jump shot. But nothing easy at the rim. And that's going to take them a long way in this tournament, those two, plus their ability to be effective offensively. Alana Smith's form right now is unbelievable. I mean, she is one of the most talented bigs in the world right now. She's definitely going to be one of the more talented bigs going around in these Olympic Games in this tournament. And we've seen the Opals play through her a lot in these couple of warm-up games, which is really telling because she's not always had as big a role when she's put on that Opals jersey in tournaments past, but clearly she has the trust of Sandy Brondello now. She's got the runs on the board with what she's been doing at WNBA level these past 2 seasons, and her ability to score in a variety of ways, but also move the ball and contribute defensively on the boards is just going to be huge as far as this team goes. But that 2 big combination, and even when they go to the bench and it's Kayla George or it's going to be Lauren Jackson, even Mariana Tolo, having 2 bigs on the floor at every point in time is going to be huge for this team. And I think that's probably a strong strategic move that we'll see them kind of employ consistently throughout this tournament.
And how far do they go, Tom? What's your prediction for this squad? I mean, I think there's a widespread expectation that this squad is capable of getting into the medal rounds, is capable of getting into the semifinals. And I think most of us are in agreement with that. Do you think it's a matter of just the schedule breaking correctly to be able to get to a gold medal game, and then you get, that one punch knockout shot? Everyone's a knockout chance if they've got the amount of talent that the Opals do, even against the might of Team USA. Is it just a case of potentially catching them on the right night?
Yeah, I think it really is. And look, when I wrote an article summing up the week from those warm-up games in Melbourne a couple of weeks ago and what we took away from the Opals, the last thing I said was this team can contend for a gold medal. And whether they can win a gold medal, you never know. But as you said, you can have a great shot at it on the day. But I absolutely see them having enough talent. And if things break right and these injuries don't become too serious and they can get through healthily and cleanly, they can absolutely get to the gold medal game. And then from there, anything can happen. And that's got to be the goal. It's got to be to get back on the podium. They did it at the last World Cup. This team's even better than that team for mine. There's more talent top to bottom. You've got some of these younger players like Melbourne and Smith who are going to play even bigger roles. And even Ezzy Magbagor's just grown in leaps and bounds over the last 2 years. They've got the talent. And I think they've got the balance as well of youth and experience, and offensive and defensive capability to really make a deep run into this thing.
Amazing. Tom Hirsch, thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you again during the group stages and then again, hopefully, during the deep medal rounds. Thank you so much for being with us again on the Podium Pod.
Look forward to it. Thanks, Adam.
Thanks, Tom. Have a great night, everyone.